Yeah, I don't, yeah, you can put it where you want.
I'm going to turn it back since I'll be addressing you all. That makes a little more sense.
Okay, I don't have a red light on my microphone, but I'm assuming it's working.
Talk loud.
Okay, so good evening. It's 5:30 for Joe Verizon. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting on Tuesday, September 29th. We're here to discuss the water meter transmitter project via ordinance number 2020-092. The Water and Sewer Committee previously met on July 30th, 2020, July 16th, 2020, May 21st, 2020, and March 11th, 2020 to discuss the project. We will start with roll call. Mr. Haas, Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Ms. Warnicki.
Here.
Mr. Slough.
Here.
Mr. Greeno.
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Here.
And Mr. Wilson. Here. Okay, thank you. Staff that I see is Mr. Stashak, our city auditor, Ms. Murin, our mayor, and Mr. Thomas, our city engineer.
We do have a Jason Phillips, and then Jeff and Ann Fenimore, Mark Rudolph. Remind your name.
Carol Tupelo.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take
I
that.
think I'm going to mark Jason by name and the rest as guests this evening. Just a little bit of how a committee of the whole goes. This is a council meeting. There are no public comments or both oral or written unless council as a whole and by majority invites comments from a specific person. We will start with the project. I think the mayor has passed out some handouts. I don't know if you'd like to go first and just go over it. And then if the auditor or the engineer have any comments, or Jason from the water department will call on you then. Same, if you have any questions, just let me know. Ms. Mayor.
Perfect. I think I'm far away from everyone. I can take my mask off. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for coming this evening and for your patience as we make sure that we're addressing the concerns that were previously brought up. The documents that you have in front of you, I'm going to go through briefly, but I wanted to provide it in written documentation so that it was clear and you guys could review it prior to the council meeting. I won't read through it all because I hate when people do that, but this is a lot of information that we have tried to condense. This has obviously been a discussion point for the last 2 years, if not longer, and is an important project that we need to move forward with at this time. What we have in front of you is the request for appropriations of $250,000, and that is really to get our initial infrastructure established to address the issue with our transmitters as well as the meters, specifically related to the fact that 2G, which is what we currently operate on, is going to be phased out really at any moment. If the infrastructure we currently have in place goes out, they will not be replacing it. And what that means is we would then have to have manual meter readers go out and read our 21,000 meters that we have across our community. A number of issues that were brought up are summarized in the documents. First was the design build compliance. There was questions on if the bid process and the ordinance that was previously discussed was appropriate. As you will see, we have an opinion from the law director stating that all of the appropriate processes were followed and that the design was appropriate for the project at hand. I know I won't address the specific RFQ that was sent out. There are a number of copies that are out there. I only printed off 5 since it was a little bit longer, but that was also emailed to you previously. And as you read through it, you can see it was specifically addressed as a design build project, not only for meter replacement, but transmitters as well as the supporting infrastructure. Additionally, those specs were advertised appropriately and put out requests for qualifications on September 12th and 19th of 2018, so quite a while ago. The second issue at hand, and I'll run through this and then certainly open it up for questions. The second issue that was raised was the concern that the conversation between Suez in the bid preparation process or RFQ preparation specs was inappropriate. I just wanted to point out that the information that was received from Suez was just a summary of the AWWA specs that they require through their manual M6. And so those were items that all of the vendors, all of the organizations that submitted RFQs met, including Badger, though they did not submit a spec, their product would have also met it. So it was nothing that disqualified any other vendors from submitting a proposal or qualifications for this project. Additionally, I know there was a concern related to Badger not being able to submit a proposal related to the specifications. As you will see, I'm going to hit on a couple of things. The main point that you can see from Badger in the communication, I would first like to draw your attention to the fact that the documentation was sent on October 26th and received on October 29th, which was the day the bid, or the RFQ, my apologies, the RFQ was due.
Mayor, where are you at?
Yes, okay, so on page 2 of the summary document, where it says spec development, Badger communication, this also kind of ties into the frequency standards. And if you go to the 6th page of your document, again, I'm trying to summarize 2 years worth of analysis and discussion into a short packet. The document that says Badger meter at the top, received October 29th, 2018. They recognized that they were not able to submit a proposal in relation to that bid. It was received on the day of the bid. As is standard in our RFQ proposals, we said if you had any questions related to the bid specifications that were released, to reach out to us. A number of the vendors did and say, are you open to considering other frequencies? And we stated, yes, but that's not our preferred. We're welcome to do that as we progress in discussions. At this point, what we're looking at is the qualifications of the vendors and how they would manage and operate and propose the project to move forward. One of the other items was that was specifically brought up that Badger had concerns with was in the RFQ, we specifically stated that we wanted to operate on the 450 to 470 megahertz range. There were 2 primary factors in why we decided to move forward in this way. First, the lower frequencies can travel farther distance with less power, which means that we have to have less data collection units or DCUs, as well as they are able to use less power, which means their battery lasts longer. The second item was the 450 to 470 megahertz range provides a licensed frequency, which would be dedicated to our transmitter. So as we mentioned, this has a licensed channel rather than an open frequency, so you're going to have less possibility for interference. The other thing to note, though it wasn't originally in our decision-making process for why we requested the 450 to 470 megahertz, was the fact that there's an ongoing cost associated with using cellular frequency. So yes, the upfront cost of the Badger meter, and I don't want to specifically address them in all of this, but one of the things that we note is that specifically related to the Badger system is that yes, it may be less expensive upfront, but you're going to have an ongoing annual fee of $1 per transmitter moving forward. As I stated, that Badger communication item was just the fact of the matter that we did not receive any questions prior to the communication we received on the day that the RFQ was due. Second, I know there was concerns about the fact that we had had discussions with Suez prior to executing a contract since the time the RFQ was released and subsequently decided that we wanted to move forward with Suez. We did have a letter of intent that was signed prior to us, once we selected them as the vendor of choice for this project. And I think it's important to state that we haven't fully, at that point, had not fully decided the scope of the project. We knew that we needed to upgrade our infrastructure. We knew we needed to update our transmitters and meters. But there was a whole range of how we could have addressed that. We had the option to go in and say, listen, we're going to do everything in one foul swoop, and we're going to update the infrastructure, we're going to update the transmitters, we're going to update the meters, and that could cost us $15 million. That's great. You know, okay, you know what? If I want to buy my dream car, I could have a Ferrari, but the dollars and cents don't necessarily make sense on doing that. And so we needed to scale back and say, what are the things that we actually needed to be able to maintain operations? And that's what we have in front of you at this point. We have gone through and scaled back the project to a point where we say, listen, we need to implement the AMI infrastructure to be able to collect the data and communicate with our transmitters. We need to upgrade the transmitters that are currently not operational to make sure that we're able to interface with them and collect data from our meters so that we're having regular communication and we can detect leaks, that we can help people know what is an accurate measure, and we don't need to have our folks going out and finding every single one, especially as we go into the winter months and dig them out of snow to get those. And we need to replace our meters as they go bad. And so that is what we really have scaled back. As you can see, as we get to that refining the scope, we've been discussing with Suez. Yes, that's correct. We have been communicating with them, and that was because we needed to define what the project looked like. Once we said, yes, you're the vendor that we want to work with to manage this project. Item 4 on those first 3 pages of summary that we put together is really just some overall notes about the project. Currently we have 1,035 transmitters that are not working. We have only 181 replacement meters available to switch out at any moment in time as these meters continue to go bad. Suez, I think it's important to note, is an organization that looks at various products. They do not have a specific product that they have to give to us. When we chose them, we knew that they were going to evaluate all the different products and recommend what was best for the city of Findlay, both with transmitters and meters, which includes evaluating Badger products. Additionally, Suez provides a 100% technology guarantee for 15 years. So for example, we are currently seeing the phase out of 2G. If their project, say in 10 years, we experience the phase out of 5G and our products are 5G compatible but aren't compatible with the updated technology, if we're in that 15 years, Suez is responsible for making sure that we are continued to able to operate and would replace the products necessary for us to be able to move forward. So I think that's a huge benefit that they are providing, as well as a 15-year warranty compared to just a 10-year warranty. So those are a lot of the items that we addressed. I think that the concerns that were brought up, again, I just want to reiterate, was the design build, which the law director has addressed, as well as the RFQ that you all have seen specifically states it was a design build project. As we look at the spec development, all of the specs that were provided from any of the vendors were AWWA and were items that we would have received on our own. We just received them from one of the vendors to help move forward in an abbreviated process. We had specific reasons for choosing the frequency standards, and though Badger did not decide to submit a spec, I think it would be inappropriate to move back in time and reevaluate that. They did not meet the deadline, and unfortunately, that was a missed opportunity on their point, but that does not mean that Badger products were not evaluated as part of our process. I think those were the main items. With that, I would like to jump forward to some of the other documents in your packet. The 4th page was the law director's opinion related to the design build. The next item was just a copy of the letter of intent. After that was the communication that we received from Badger. The next item, the final item in your packet, is a summary of the finances related to this project. So what we have in front of you currently is about a $500,000 project. Again, this is to get the infrastructure established, to do this over a period of time. Unfortunately, as we have kicked this can down the road, the cost continues to go up because we have to we need to replace various transmitters all at once because we have had so many more go out. So what we are recommending is that if we can move forward with this year we can replace 328 of the standard transmitters. And then for the next 5 years following that, we would try to replace about 4,200 transmitters a year. And that is assuming that we are able to maintain 2G. Depending on financial position, we may be able to replace those faster. We may have to slow it down a little bit, but the big thing is that 2G could go away at any point. Our transmitters would no longer be operational. The project in front of you allows us to do it over time, running parallel systems, get up and running, and over the next 6 years, so 2020 through 2025, we would be able to replace all of our transmitters for a cost of about $5 million. So I certainly understand this is not small money, but this is what we need to be able to do to maintain our infrastructure and make sure that we're continuing to be operational. And there's a lot of benefit in doing this, and I would highly encourage us to continue to move forward on this project. Because the longer we wait, it is just going to cause it to be more urgent and is going to continue to raise the cost because we're going to have to make a larger lump sum payment to get caught up. I know that's a lot of information, so I apologize. We really tried to condense it down. What questions do you have?
Mr. Wolf.
Mayor, so Suez is just a wholesaler, is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
They are more of a project manager, so they work with companies as a vendor to say, listen, we can do economies of scale, large products. For example, they're in Mansfield currently. Mansfield pretty much took our exact RFQ, sent it out, and is halfway through their project at this point. Because what Suez does, and many times, one of the proposals they put forward is they would literally bring their crews in and do the full integration, implementation, go through and do that. And we said, okay, well, if we put it down to bite-sized pieces, we don't need to pay your labor costs to have you do that. So they are really I don't know, Brian, if you have a different name for it, but they're a project manager as well as a vendor.
So they make a product also?
They do not make a product.
So whose product are they going to use?
In this instant, we have chosen the Aclara transmitters and the Neptune meters.
Aclara and Neptune.
Correct.
So did they look at Suez's product?
They looked at Badger product, yes. Suez.
Did we ask, so if we're hiring them as a project manager, did we look at any other project management groups?
Well, that was what the RFQ was for. So again, all of the different vendors that submitted RFQs, Fortnite and Core in Maine, I believe was their name, they all have access to multiple different products, and they were recommending, here is how we would recommend this project move forward. And Brian and Jason, feel free to throw things at me or shout if I am misstating anything, since you guys have been the ones loving this project forward.
How did we determine that we were going to use the low frequency system?
Really, that's a best practice at this point, because you can have the dedicated channels. For example, one of the things that, as we've discussed this and I've learned a bit more, one of the issues that you would have with the higher frequencies, again, is the undedicated channels, unlicensed, as well as you would have more DCU, so you would have to have more infrastructure, which is more costly, and then again, the cost of almost annual subscriptions to using those channels.
So is there, I guess the lower frequencies, when I think about that, is this a system that only one company makes? Or are there multiple companies that make a lower frequency system?
Oh yeah, no, many of the products. Again, we were able to look at, it wasn't just Aclara and Neptune that met that frequency requirement. No, there were a variety of products that met that.
You mentioned the cell cost a couple times. What is that annually?
It is approximately $1 per transmitter per year. So we have about 21,000 transmitters in the city of Findlay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
No problem, thank you.
Not sure if the auditor has anything he wants to discuss concerning this evening.
answer your question, I'm prepared to answer any questions this body would like to ask me. I think it's wonderful that you're meeting to get more of an investigative view of what's going on here. I can tell you from what I've heard and what's been shared with me that the statements that I made at the prior council meeting on the record and approved in your minutes still stand. Should you pass this, I will be unable to sign the agreements, allow the PO process to move forward, or pay based on where we're at.
Because of what, Jim?
That's the exact right question. Multiple reasons. It's complex. I don't care what company ends up with this job. It's not my purview. It's not my concern. The tough part about being your fiscal officer, your city auditor, is a responsibility or a burden has been put on this office statutorily to make sure process is followed, that we're loyal to process. The law director's opinion, I certainly appreciate it and respect the profession and the job they have to do. The code we're talking about here is not 153.01 to 153.7. It's 153.65, 153.70. It's much more limited than the broad scope of code that's been presented here because this is design build. To help you understand, design build is a statutory process that was allowed for statutory cities in 2012 by the state of Ohio. When you do design build, the first thing you do is you conceptualize a project. Then you go out and you say to the engineering and architectural world, this is the project we'd like to build. We're looking for somebody who's qualified that wants to take this very ethereal, very broad project and help us narrow it down so that we can get qualifications from design builders, not design engineers. So you start with the design engineer, and if I said builder before, I apologize. You start with the design engineer or architect who helps you choose a design builder. Again, this is a statutory process. It's very, very specific. There's an exception to going out and doing a request for qualifications for the design architect or engineer. And that is if the city has a proper professional engineer on staff who can design the project and put it out there. However, there's a caveat in the statute, and it's very clear. One of the things that has to be done, and I have no paperwork, no evidence, and I did ask the question as to whether or not it could be done, is if the city intends to be the design engineer, they have to register with the Department of Administrative Services as the design engineer prior to the project starting, putting the world on notice that we are designing this project conceptually and we're going to move forward and we're going to go out and look for qualifications for design build firms. So right there, did we do that? If we did, we can check that box and move on.
Well, before we get to that, did we do that? Did we? I mean, so you're saying that if we were the design build engineer,
Design architect or
design architect on this, we would have had to have submitted as such, or
it says it says here. I have to apologize. I have to apologize. This notebook. This is my documentation for justifying the process is correct. It's as you can see, quite lengthy. It says obtaining the services. This is Ohio Revised Code 153.692, so it's within that window. Obtaining services of a criteria architect or engineer. Section B, obtaining the services through an architect or engineer who is an employee of the public authority notifying the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission before the services are performed. The Ohio Facilities Construction Commission needs to be notified. Typically, we do that against the Department of Administrative Services. I made the request, asked the question, don't have an answer, so from that perspective.
Mayor, do you want to answer that, or should I ask Brian?
To be honest, I'm pretty peeved at the moment because I think I included you all on the follow-up when the auditor made a variety of accusations. I asked him to specifically outline so that we could address the concerns that he brought forward. And the response was, look at the council meeting minutes. I responded back with the council meeting minutes say that there are too many concerns to address. And the items that are bolded and outlined are the ones that he specifically brought up. What I can say is that Brian and I have consulted at length with the law director and gone through the process, and all of the documentation we provided to each of you was the process that we followed. And unfortunately, the law director is not able to be here this evening because he had a prior commitment. But I can state that we've gone through every process as we appropriately do. We have done many design build projects and have not had this issue. I would love to specifically address the ordinance that he's bringing up. I can't do that off the top of my head. But we have gone through this at length. This has been something he's been aware of for multiple years. And the fact of the matter is, I think we're just kind of treating this as a political issue, and I'll have to consult with the attorney to go back because I'm not the expert on the specific ordinance.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Mr. Stashak, if we're going to sell bonds or stocks or whatever, we depend on your expertise. We have a letter from the law director, and we depend on him for our legal opinions and so on, saying this is all right. Now, I don't quite get it. The law director says we're okay. That's his purview. Your purview is financial, and you do a great job of it. But I just do not understand when the law director says we're okay, and you say you would not go forward with this. This doesn't make any sense.
I can answer that question in a broad sense, which may help. And that is, when we prepare the books and are subject to audit, and they review expenditures of our office, they look to where we receive the authority to make that payment. The authority to pay this project comes from not only the fact that the contracts are in place and are correct, but in this particular case that we have a statutory process in place very specific to statutory cities for a design build process. So, unfortunately, and again, I respect, we have 2 years of work almost in this. I respect that. Again, I respect that the administration has a particular approach they want to use. However, I do think that it's important to note when design build is talked about in the state of Ohio, the purpose of design build is to start with an ethereal concept, but give you a method of building it where the city doesn't have to be completely hands-on, so experts can build things in a efficient, productive manner, even if it's not necessarily the lowest cost. So, in this case, the law director has given an opinion, but I think some significant facts have been omitted based on the documentation, or there's still documentation omitted, and there's more with regard to Mr. Walsh's question. I'd like to continue, presuming that we're able to show that we did that. Again, I'm not here, I'm not challenging, I'm saying I don't have what I need to move forward, and I have to be loyal to a process. So the next thing you do, so if we did this correctly, and we are the design engineer, which is great, the next thing you do is what we did. You go out for an RFQ, a request for qualifications, to determine and find qualified design build firms. So we've got a firm that's creating a design and has spec'd out an RFQ to find qualified design build firms. And then the specifications say, you narrow it down to 3 in the RFQ. And you get requests for proposals. In the RFQ, there's no money. You get requests for proposals about money in the RFPs. 3. Again, knowing that it's not a standard procurement process, the state says in this process, you look at the qualifications, you take the best 3 qualified firms in your opinion, and you can consult with your design engineer if you like to formulate and make those decisions, but then you get 3 proposals from 3 different firms that are qualified for design build, and then you evaluate the 3.
What if you only have 2 proposals?
Great question. It's my understanding from all the white papers I've read and trying to understand this process, that when that happens, you create the justification, you prove that that happened, in other words, you document it, and you move forward with the 2 or with the 1, which can happen. But in this case, we had 3. So in my reading and understanding of being loyal to the process and the process we should have followed, we should have got proposals from all 3. However, I want to take a step back. When the city decided it was going to be the design engineer, at that point, actually, maybe even well before that point, going back to July of 2018, we have emails, as I mentioned before, between the water department and Suez. And the one that really caught my eye is in every document I have, you have. Every document I'm talking about are documents we received in day-to-day business, and they all came from the administration and their folks. And again, mistakes happen, things happen. I think this is that case. But one of the ones that really caught my eye was in Brian's write-up. He says in here, the specifications, design criteria scorecard were created. The previously emailed Buffalo Montclair RFP, Neptune's tech spec, Neptune tech spec E, coder register, Neptune, residential mechanical meters, residential ultrasonic meters, turbine Shelbyville meter maintenance RFPs were used as a starting point. You go back to an email between the city and Suez, dated July 13th, 3 months, October, 3 months before the RFQ, excuse me, let me correct that, RFQ. 3 months before we published an RFQ, we have an email dated July 13th that says, from Suez to our city of Findlay, Ohio, meeting RFQ documents, Buffalo, Montclair, RFP, Shelbyville, meter maintenance, Neptune tech spec, compound meters, code registration, Neptune tech spec. It's almost word for word. So, is Suez, now let's talk about common sense. Not question, not an attorney. Is Suez going to send us specs that they can't win? What contractor is going to send specs that they can't win? And it's inappropriate that we receive these from them before.
Why is it inappropriate?
Let me relate it. I guess I talked about this a couple different times with my staff, but we wanted to come up with a good analogy. So you're in school in a class, and the teacher says, I'm only giving 1 A today. One person's going to get an A. And the whole class is going to take the test tomorrow. And then she says to little Tommy, Tommy, come here. I want you to write some of the questions on the test tomorrow. It gives Tommy a better chance of being the only one that gets the A. Think about that. This is millions and millions and millions of dollars we're talking about here. There are other examples when you cross-reference the emails prior to the issuing of the RFQ.
Ms. Warnick.
What's the date on those emails? You're talking July of 18, right?
This particular email was July 13th of 2018, and the spec RFQ advertisement in our paper, in the Findlay Courier, was published October 12th of 2018.
So
and
why
October 19th.
wasn't it discussed or questioned or Brian talked to by you until September of 2020?
How was I to know that this email existed until I began reviewing the documents when we were looking at a question as to whether or not the project was even bid or could be moved forward?
But it came up on the third reading for council from 2 years prior.
I think I explained that or addressed that. The emails, I'm not on an email chain for every department, for every project we're working on. We collected, and again, it's auditor, my job, when you are moving forward and we're just double checking and helping in what way we can. My job is to make sure if we're going to make a payment that we have the authority to make that payment. And unfortunately, for my sake, But fortunately, the state has decided, for the state as a whole, that fiscal officers of government entities will be personally responsible for finances. And so, unfortunately, maybe it's an intended consequence, is I worry as much about $10 because it could come out of my checkbook as I do, as you can imagine, about millions. They call them finding for recoveries. I'm bonded in favor of the state of Ohio. They don't even have to ask me. If they think something was paid incorrectly, they simply go to the insurance company and get the money back.
Mr. Russell.
Mayor or city engineer, have we used a design bid process in the past?
Mr. Thomas.
Yes, we have.
For, is
The
it common?
renovations that were done to the municipal building, where they moved records up to the 3rd floor, police
Okay.
down here, stuff in the courts, that was done as design build, yes.
So this is a common process?
It's a process that we've done before, yes.
Is the steps taken for this meter project the same as the steps taken for other design build projects?
The only difference was when we did it for the building, we did have a separate firm that was the criteria engineer. They were the ones that drew the plans. We told them what they wanted. They drew rough footprints, and then we went out with that to the design builders. In this case, since we didn't have actual drawings, we were just putting together specifications. And since the code said we were allowed to do it, we put those specifications together.
But there's other projects other than just the muni building that's our design build, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. And were the bills paid on the municipal building project that was a design build?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So, in other words, we're following the same process that was fine for previously, and but that one was fine and this one is not. Is kind of what is what I should
You're asking,
gather.
that's kind of an opinion question, in my opinion, yes.
Okay,
Not everyone would agree with that.
understood. All right, thank you.
Ms. Mayor.
I was also going to state that as we've discussed this with the law director, he specifically looked at the criteria and statutory requirements of design build and believed we were in compliance. That's why you have the letter in front of you. Additionally, I know the auditor just brought up the fact that Suez would not give criteria that they would not be able to meet, and I would just direct you to the final form of the RFQ that you have in front of you, which is the criteria sheet, which does not get into the level of detail related to specific products that would be utilized, but rather talks about the overall firm and their ability to complete the job, provide applicable equipment, and guide the city through the overall project.
Mr. Hellman.
Mayor or Auditor Stachek, I guess I have a question. If we go ahead and approve this, and the auditor says that he can't pay the bill, correct? What happens? If you want to know my opinion, I don't think we're going to solve this tonight amongst the 10 of us. Simply, whatever.
Mr. Station.
Thank you for asking. I can't speak to the totality of the answer to your question, but I can tell you, typically, when you pass legislation, contracts are prepared, they're signed off on by the appropriate parties, and then it is required by law that for the contract to be valid, that I validate that the funds are there and it's appropriate expenditure. I am saying that unless I've been satisfied that we've properly followed the process, I won't sign that agreement. And then typically once an agreement's signed, then you start to see POs come up. Ultimately, if it's into work being done, checks being paid. But I've already instructed my accounts payable person to not allow those POs to move forward without us reviewing and addressing them one by one.
But my question was,
What happens after that if I don't sign that agreement?
yeah, that's the question.
I guess we would find out I don't but I can tell you, you know, it's again, I have complete respect for what's going on here.
Yeah, right.
But I truly believe that we're spending a lot of time trying to justify something that does not appear right and that I can't endorse with my signature. And that's not something I say lightly, as you all, I hope, can respect. Even though we're way down the road, we are not in jeopardy. And it appears to me it would be a lot easier, a lot faster, and a better position for the entire community if we press the reset button. Start over. Get yourself a design engineer. Broaden up your specs. I've now had 2 companies contact me to say our specs were not reasonable based on however these meetings are being advertised. And
Well, how many
that process, if it's followed properly, I'm sure it puts my office in the entire community, the entire city, from a business perspective, from a government perspective, completely in the proper position to move forward. Because again, we're talking about, although 1 year is $500,000, the document in front of you infers that it's a total of $5 million. And the documents that I've seen, I mean, you're not making a decision tonight about $500,000. You're making that decision about millions and millions and millions. One step takes you to each consecutive step, and possibly more based on the documents I see. I don't know that based on where I'm at, one of the things we talked about originally is can I sign or not sign? Your original capital improvements appropriation was for meters. We're way beyond meters, and we're to something that I don't even think council has had an opportunity, a fair opportunity to really understand the implications. This has implications on you. How many people are in the department, as well as what the equipment costs and what the costs are to the community for decades to come, at least 15 years.
Mr. Russell.
To use your analogy, the people, the firms who didn't win the bid, that's like little Timmy who got an F on the test, say, I want a do-over. And so I don't care how many firms called us or contacted you or whomever afterwards and said the bid wasn't fair. That's number one. Number two, we're a committee of the whole. We're not making any decisions tonight.
I get that. I can tell you the challenge that I have in responding to that statement is that this is a case where it's clear that the documents, there was communications and documents came from the firm that won the RFQ that helped in some way, maybe in a very large way, develop the RFQ.
So you're now an engineer. You're now an engineer. So in other words, the specs were not broad enough.
Mr. Russell, please, Mr. Stashak and Mr. Russell, let each other answer the question before you ask another question.
Well, I'm asking a question and I'm getting a soliloquy in response.
If documents, as far as you asked me if I am an engineer, yes. I'm a trained engineer. I'm not a PE, but I do have an engineering degree from the Ohio State University. I got it in 1988. So yes, I am an engineer, number one. Number two, it's clear from those documents, and you don't have to be an engineer to read those documents and understand the procurement process. It's clear that the documents were done in such a way that involved the company that won in a way that they probably shouldn't have been involved in from the very beginning, months before we advertised and bid in the paper. That's clear.
Mr. Wolfson.
Jim, so just to be clear, the law director's letter doesn't give you the ability to move forward.
I agree with that statement because we are a statutory government based on the federal system here in Ohio. We have a mayor, a law director, an auditor, and a treasurer, and a council. You write the rules and you fund the government. The administrators are supposed to run the government. The mayor's office does a fine job too, and I mean that with all respect, going out and doing the things that need to be done in the city to run it every day. When we get into a pickle, if it's a legal question, or if we move away from proper process, you now have to satisfy two individuals. The law director from a legal perspective, did we do everything within the bounds of the laws? And the finance officer, the city auditor from a financial perspective, does it meet the requirements so that the city auditor can move forward and make payment when payment is due? I'm saying, irregardless of whether I agree with the law director or not in this particular case, I don't think I've met the bounds that allows me to pay this. And so I just can't do it. It wouldn't be right.
So that doesn't give you, so if we go forward with this, you sign the contracts, go forward, and we get audited, you can't pull out this letter and say, hey, he said it was fine. And the auditor goes, oh, then that's okay, we're good to go. That doesn't happen that way?
Maybe sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Because the bigger question is, does it stand the test? In other words, what if somebody in the community challenges us and says, you're raising my water rates because of this project, whether it was intended or not at the beginning, and I'm just supposing. And somebody in the community says, you didn't do this, you didn't follow, the auditor said you didn't follow the statutes. I'm suing you to stop this. You know, what does it matter at that point? In other words, there's lots of ways that this could happen. You know, we know what personal lawsuits are. We know they can go beyond suing you under your profession. At some point, as an elected official, if we truly believe that something hasn't been done, I'm talking about following process, being loyal to the process. And if we truly believe as an elected official that in this instance, whether it was malicious or not, and I don't think anybody knows it was truly malicious. So I did not, my goal was not to make accusations, my goal was to inform this council. I don't have what I need to check the boxes to move forward, and I'm knowledgeable that I don't have that, and I'm not gonna lean on the law director as an excuse to do my job. Not in this case. It's too much money, too many people, and quite frankly, whether it's $10 or $1 million, I'm gonna treat it the same way.
Ms. Mayor.
Auditor, I really appreciate your statement that you certainly don't believe that any of our employees had malicious intent, because your previous accusations of collusions were quite upsetting and completely off base. I would like to request to go back just slightly, and while we have the auditor here, to specifically address the statutory requirements that he had concerns about, since I had previously requested those and he said it was a legal matter and could not specify them. So if you wouldn't mind just going back to what you previously said, so we can make sure we address your specific concerns and understand how we can address and move forward.
Station.
I think it's very clear in your previous meeting on the record what my primary concerns are. Again, I believe it's completely inappropriate that the company that won the request for qualifications to participate in communications that make it appear as if they had a heavy hand in writing those qualifications that they wanted. But if that's all okay with this body, you have a whole nother set of problems. And the set of problems is in design bill, as listed in the white papers for Break Record, as reading the ORC. And again, as you all know, I'm not an attorney, but I am the finance officer. I have to make sure we dot I's and cross T's. It says when you go out for requests for qualifications, you get those qualifications, you narrow it down to the best three. In our case, we had 3, so that's the best 3. And then you get RFPs from all 3. We have not done that. That's, I guess, the simplest way I can say it. And I don't know how you recover from that at this point.
Mr. Hellman.
Well, I think part of it, what you're saying is that Suez will never win this contract, for one.
I don't think so. I don't think that's a true statement. I know
Well,
it's
you said that-
county that's possible.
But you said that, they've sort of muddied the waters here by having the information and submitting things ahead of time.
I haven't said they couldn't win the contract. The fair statement would be if you step back and press the reset button and start over,
Yeah,
and you bring in a design engineer to redesign,
yeah.
open it up to make sure it's fully transparent in the light so that the community knows we've done the best we can do with the water and sewer system that we have for obtaining the best vendor for services. You you step back, the more bids you have, the better. There are millions and millions and millions of meters in this country, and that you only got bids from 3 companies?
Well, I've got to assume that those companies are reviewing all those meters. We're not gonna go through and look at different meter
But
manufacturing folks. That's why you're hiring those people.
But to my point and your point, or your question, if the RFQ, the qualification process, is broad enough, and it's supposed to be conceptual, this is design build, we're not supposed to know what it is before we start. We're not supposed to know what it is until we're getting the RFPs on specific ways to do it. So when we're doing the qualifications, I would think you would want them as broad as you can to get as many positive ideas for the community, because there may be even another communications method we're not aware of that's even cheaper or better for our community. It's not my position to tell engineering how to do their job or how to do their job, but it is, I am an elected official like you, and I'm happy to answer your question, and I would not, again, I don't think a properly run design build process under the statutes of the state of Ohio in 153.65 to 153.70 eliminate any firm from becoming the design build firm. But it does force them to compete through proposals. They're not supposed to be picked from everything that's been documented to me. They're not to be picked at the beginning to the elimination of the other firms. And certainly, it seems inappropriate that they had a heavy hand in writing the qualifications that they want.
And that's an accusation on your part, I guess, Kim. That's what I don't understand. You're saying that they had a heavy hand in determining who was gonna, what products were gonna be used and what firm was gonna be selected, and they were selected because they were providing some information ahead of time.
Providing an extreme amount of information.
Well, I don't.
That's clear from the documents that I provided this body.
I doubt that we're gonna resolve this until you and the legal counsel or the city council sit down and figure out whether or not we can do this.
I am firm in my position, and I don't want to lead you I don't want to mislead you.
Well-
I'm firm in my position, and I don't see that changing. I don't see an answer for you other than
Start over.
start over. I just
And we're-
don't see it.
and we're-
And I hate to say that,
Well,
but
and we're 12 months down the road probably by the
I
time.
don't know. That may be true, that may be not.
Gonna be at least 6
Mr.
of that.
Schindeldecker?
Mr. Stashak, you've used the term inappropriate, and I presume that was carefully chosen wordage. Let's split a legal hair. Is it simply, in your opinion, inappropriate, or is it illegal?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know it
The
is.
law director
that-
says it is.
Our law director does, and I've talked to many professionals that, some of which you all know, and I'm not here to point fingers or this or that. I am of the sound belief that my position is the proper position, and I'm going to be steadfast and hold that position until I am shown properly and fully that we have complied with what needs to be done for me to be able to move forward as your fiscal officer, and that is very, very difficult to do. I feel very badly. I mean, I've known these people for a long time, or most of these folks, and I respect what they do. It's not easy to stand here and say something that I'm sure is frustrating as hell to most of them. But I don't see where I have a choice, and I'm sorry. I have to stand firm and do my job the way I've been elected to do it in the manner I've been instructed to do it.
Any other questions? Ms. Mann?
I would just draw your attention to page 3, line 3, where the auditor was notified of this information and the process that was followed in the documentation of February 2019. We
Which
will,
page, Mayor, which page 3, please?
page 3 of my summary document. So, page 3 of the packet in total.
Under the overall project items, is that a
Yep.
subheading?
Yep, so page, it would be right above that, so kind of on that back page where it says overall project items.
The auditor was notified
Yes.
at the end of January?
we will do our best to resolve these issues and work through. I have full confidence that we followed the appropriate process, and we will go back and address the items. And again, I would just reiterate the fact that the information provided by Suez was AWWA standards. These are information that we could have looked up on the internet. A vendor sent them to us. There was no inappropriate communication between these vendors. I'm sure the auditor receives emails from folks all the time saying, hey, you should check out this standard of information for the state of Ohio. And if he clicks on the link there, that's not inappropriate compared to if he goes and gets it on the state auditor's website himself. So we will work through it to the best of our abilities, and I'm sorry that it's taken so long. I appreciate your time, and as you guys have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I appreciate your time.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Wilson?
Mayor, go back to the 2 emails where we spec'd out things for, and use those exact specs. Does that ring a little odd, the standpoint that we maybe use those because they came exactly from Suez?
They're the AWWA standards. I think someone copied and pasted them off of a website. I think we have vendors reach out to us all the time and say, hey, I see you're having issues with your transmitters, or you may be looking to spec something out. I have emails all the time from vendors saying you may want to look at these new specs from AWWA or whatever it may be. I would agree it would be a concern if they said something that then narrowed the field to one specific product that they were making an extreme margin on. But in this case, it didn't rule out any of the products that we evaluated, which, as Councilman Hellman mentioned, the companies that we were looking at look at a broad range of products. The fact of the matter is these were the only 3 that responded in appropriate time. And so I don't think that it's inappropriate at all, and it did not narrow the field of product that we were able to evaluate whatsoever.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Niemeyer. Motion?
Yes, I'd
Second?
like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. We are adjourned.
Do note we have another meeting
Yeah.
I'd like to
for
say
council only.
for the public here, the meeting that's happening is not open public, subject to the laws of the state of Ohio with regard to audit review. So,